We talked for a few more minutes, but the smiles slowly faded from my husband's and mother-in-law's faces. "Laura, are you all right?" my husband asked, his tone filled with impatience. "What? Oh, it's nothing," I replied, though I felt uneasy. He gave me a suspicious look, as if he were plotting something. Suddenly, my mother-in-law stood up abruptly. "Ouch! Oh!" She clutched her stomach and rushed to the bathroom. "Mom, what's wrong?" my husband called after her, panic creeping into his voice. "Why does my stomach hurt this much? This can't be," she groaned from the bathroom. "Laura, you didn't switch the tea, did you?" my husband demanded. "I did. Me and your mother. Why would you do that?" he snapped. "What's wrong if I switched it?" I responded, my voice steady. "My name is Laura, a 30-year-old office worker. My husband Joshua and I have been married for 2 years. We met through work. He was a mid-career hire from a client I was working with. At first, he struggled to adapt to the new job, but the next time I saw him, he seemed much more comfortable. I thought he was a smart man, and eventually, we grew closer. We started going out on dates and dinners, and soon, he confessed his feelings for me. We officially began dating, and our relationship progressed smoothly. He proposed, and we got married. Our newlywed life seemed to be going well. Joshua wasn't much of a cook, so I handled most of the meals while he took care of the cleaning, laundry, and even took out the garbage without me asking. It was really helpful. But lately, something has changed. His attitude toward me isn't the same. He used to follow me around, always wanting my attention when we were at home. It felt like I was training a puppy to be patient. But now, he barely spoils me like he used to. His sweet voice has turned cold. "What's for dinner?" he asked one evening. "Hamburgers, your favorite," I replied. "Okay," was all he said, without much reaction. I had gone to the trouble of making his favorite meal, but even then, his response was indifferent. It's as if he's lost interest in me. He was so kind at the beginning, I keep hoping he'll be like that again someday. But it's not just Joshua. My mother-in-law has been another source of stress. She's been picking on me since the day we got married. "Hey, Laura, why didn't you prepare any snacks?" she would say, her tongue sharp. "I'm sorry, but you visit us without notice. Normally, you'd expect it and have something ready," she'd snap back. Until recently, Joshua always took my side, defending me against her sharp remarks. But now, he's joined her, and they've both started attacking me together. "I really don't think Laura is considerate enough to you," my husband remarked, his voice laced with disapproval. "It's a wife's duty to be prepared whenever my mother visits. You never know when I might leave you if you keep this up." His words cut deep, and the threat of divorce hung in the air. I was upset because he never used to be like this. A mixture of sadness and a lingering desire to trust him filled my heart. Then one day, something unbelievable happened. One weekend, my mother-in-law came over. This time, she brought tea and sweets, an unusual gesture for her. The tea looked expensive, and she seemed unusually cheerful. "I went out of my way to buy the finest tea I could find today," she said with a smile. "Let's drink it together." Her sudden kindness made me suspicious. It felt like there was something more to it. "Thank you, Mother. I'll make the tea today," my husband chimed in. This was surprising, considering he'd recently been telling me, "Hurry up and prepare the table. My mother's waiting," with little concern for my feelings. Why was he being so considerate now? While I was still feeling uneasy, my husband brought me a cup of tea, grinning widely. "Wow, it smells so good," my mother-in-law said as she leaned in to inhale the aroma. I was hesitant, but I leaned in closer too. It smelled like regular tea, but there was something off. Tiny bubbles floated on the surface. This didn't feel right. I knew I shouldn't drink it, but I wasn't sure how to avoid it without raising suspicion. Then an idea struck me. "Oh, mother-in-law, your favorite Korean singer was on the music show the other night, and I recorded it. You can watch it if you like." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, really? I'll watch it right away." She quickly moved to get the remote control. But just as she did, she turned back. "Oh, isn't there any snacks? You made tea, but you forgot to prepare the snacks." I told my husband my plan, knowing his arrogance would make him easy to provoke. "I was just about to get the snacks ready now," I said, feigning innocence. "Wait a moment," he replied, a bit too eager. He went off to fetch the plates and snacks, leaving me alone at the table. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly switched my tea with my mother-in-law's, making sure to do it while they weren't looking. When they returned, my husband announced, Well, let's have some tea, shall we? My mother-in-law took a sip and smiled. It's a fine cup of tea, isn't it? I took a sip as well, noticing them both watching me intently. It certainly tastes different from usual, I commented casually. My husband and mother-in-law exchanged grins, clearly pleased with themselves. I know, it's different, my husband said with a chuckle. Yeah, it's delicious, I added, matching their enthusiasm. They laughed together, clearly enjoying the situation, while I continued to drink the tea, playing along. As we talked for a few more minutes, I noticed something strange. Their smiles began to fade. Laura, are you all right? My husband asked, his voice betraying the hint of concern. What? Oh, it's nothing, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. But then, suddenly my mother-in-law stood up abruptly. Ouch! Oh, she groaned, clutching her stomach as she rushed to the bathroom. Mom, what's wrong with you? My husband cried out, panic setting in. Why does my stomach hurt so much? Oh no, this can't be, she gasped from the bathroom. A look of horror crossed my husband's face. Hey, Laura, you didn't switch the tea, did you? I did. I swapped mine with your mother's. What? Why would you do that? He demanded, his voice rising in panic. What's wrong with switching? I asked, my tone calm. Does that mean there was something bad in the tea you served me? No, it's just that. Tell me the truth, I interrupted, my voice firm. Otherwise, you won't be able to handle this, and your mother could be in real danger. His face paled as he realized I was serious. Finally, he admitted the truth, knowing he had no other choice. I actually planted a large amount of powdered laxative in your tea, my husband confessed. What? Of course, you'd get an upset stomach if you did that, I exclaimed, my shock quickly turning to anger. And in large quantities, it could be fatal. Really, call an ambulance, he panicked. Okay, I replied, my mind racing as I dialed the emergency number. My mother-in-law was soon carried away in an ambulance with my husband frantically rushing to accompany her. As they left, I calmly decided to preserve the evidence. I poured the tea my husband had laced with laxatives into a water bottle, intending to take it to the police and file a report. While they were at the hospital, I made up my mind. I began packing my belongings, determined to leave this toxic situation behind. I called my parents and asked them to help me move. Within a few hours, I was on my way to my parents' house. When I arrived, my phone rang. It was my husband. My mom is in danger. She's in pretty bad shape and has to stay in the hospital for a few days. I need you to bring her a change of clothes and some other things, okay? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are you talking about? Of course I'm not going to do that. What? You can't just abandon her like this. She's in trouble, and you're my wife. You should at least do that much. I can't be with you anymore, I said, my voice firm. I'm divorcing you. Divorce? He echoed, stunned. When I said the word divorce, my husband was silent for a moment before responding, I see. If you insist on divorcing me, then I don't have a choice. But remember, since you're the one asking for the divorce, you don't get a share of the property. What are you talking about? I shot back. You're the one who caused this divorce, so I'll take what I can get. Don't be ridiculous, he retorted. I'm not paying you a dime. This was your idea, not mine. It's not my fault. I was disgusted. You tried to make me drink a cup of laxative tea. How can you think you're not at fault? I knew I had a powerful piece of evidence that would hold him accountable, but before I could mention it, he hung up the phone. I decided to focus on more pressing matters like arranging for a lawyer. I could deal with him later. Soon after, I started receiving a barrage of unreasonable and selfish messages from him. He asked why my belongings were missing from the house and complained that everything was falling apart because I wasn't there to do the chores. He also sent a string of texts trying to guilt-trip me. You're really going through with this divorce, aren't you? Do you even understand that once we're divorced, you'll have to take care of everything on your own? There were so many things I wanted to set straight, but I didn't respond until I had secured legal representation. After my mother-in-law was discharged from the hospital, my husband and his parents showed up at my parents' house. They were in a foul mood. Divorce isn't an option, but I'll comply if that's what you want, my husband said arrogantly. You didn't even come to visit my mother in the hospital after what happened to her. You just left, taking all your belongings. How can I stay married to a woman like that? My mother-in-law glared at me with disdain, clearly backing up her son's story. It was obvious they had twisted the entire situation to suit their narrative, and my father-in-law had believed every word. Laura, my father-in-law began, his voice heavy with disappointment. I think you're being a little selfish, my father-in-law said, the only reasonable person in my husband's family. Given how they had twisted the story, it was no wonder he'd think that way. I calmly took out my phone and played an audio clip. I had actually planted a large amount of powdered laxative in Laura's tea. My husband's voice echoed from the speaker. The audio was undeniable evidence. As soon as the recording played, my husband and mother-in-law's faces turned pale. How did that conversation come about? My father-in-law asked, his shock evident. My husband had dug his own grave. Father, I felt I was in danger, I explained. I quickly swapped mother-in-law's tea with my own. Then she suddenly got a stomachache. She's always bullied me, and though my husband used to be angry with her for that, lately, they've both turned on me. This time, he went too far. After hearing my explanation, my father-in-law's face turned furious. He glared at my husband and mother-in-law. Hey Joshua, what's going on? Is it true that you were bullying her too? He demanded. My husband and mother-in-law were visibly embarrassed as they tried to defend themselves. No, wait Dad, this was just for fun. Lara got sick to her stomach, and well, I planted laxatives in her tea. It was like a fun surprise, you know. I wasn't actually bullying her, my husband stammered. And neither would I, my mother-in-law added hastily. I was just joking with her. You wouldn't really call that bullying, would you? My father-in-law's glare deepened. You think poisoning someone is just a joke? I don't know how much of a joke you think this is, I said coldly, but don't think you can get away with it forever. This is why Joshua has been so horrible to me, isn't it? I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, spilling its contents onto the table. It was photographic evidence of my husband's affair, gathered by a detective agency I'd hired. Joshua's face turned even paler. Why? Did you think I didn't know anything? I asked, my voice steady. Your attitude was so cold that I became suspicious and hired an investigator. I never thought you were actually having an affair. You were probably just trying to harass me into initiating the divorce. It was clear I'd hit the mark. Joshua was breaking out in a cold sweat, his eyes darting nervously. I confronted him with the divorce papers, ready to end this nightmare. No matter how clueless you've been, you must realize you're at a disadvantage now, I said. I'll get alimony and a fair share of the property. And by the way, I'm going to report you for assault for planting the laxative. The police? Joshua stammered. Wait a minute, don't you feel sorry for me? Sorry for you, I scoffed. You and your mother are both guilty. You cooperated with her in this. My mother-in-law, who had been quiet until now, suddenly protested. Ha! Wait a minute. Why should I be arrested? It was Joshua who planted the laxative. Mom, you came up with the plan, Joshua shot back. Don't you dare try to put this all on me. What? You asked me to help because you found a new potential wife, she retorted, her voice rising. They began to argue, each trying to shift the blame onto the other, neither willing to admit their guilt. It was a pathetic sight. Finally, my father-in-law, who had been watching in silence, snapped, Enough. You both committed a crime. Own up to it and take responsibility. Don't complain when the police come for you. And Joshua, you're going to pay Lara the alimony she deserves. And she'll get her fair share of the property. Joshua and my mother-in-law were completely shaken by the sound of my father-in-law's furious voice. I was relieved that he had snapped first. My own father had been on the verge of losing his temper too. We'll handle the rest through lawyers, I said firmly. Send the divorce papers as soon as possible. Joshua hesitated, but my father-in-law's stern glare forced him to comply. Finally, he signed the papers, sealing his fate. My deepest apologies for the trouble my foolish son and wife have caused you, my father-in-law said sincerely before taking my ex-husband and mother-in-law home. After that, I pursued legal action through my lawyer, filing claims for alimony against both my ex-husband and his mistress. I ended up receiving $30,000 from each of them. I also reported the assault to the police, submitting the audio recording of my ex-husband admitting to spiking the tea with laxatives and providing the tainted tea as evidence. Both my ex-husband and mother-in-law were arrested and fined. My father-in-law, utterly disgusted with his wife's behavior, left her and filed for divorce. This left my ex-mother-in-law to fend for herself. She had to pay the fine on her own. But with her and my ex-husband now at each other's throats, she couldn't even rely on her son. She's currently working part-time for a low salary to cover the fine. As for my ex-husband, his mistress was furious when she found out he had lied about being able to marry her without causing me any trouble. She lashed out at him, and in an attempt to appease her, he promised to pay her alimony instead. He ended up borrowing money from a loan company to pay me the alimony in one lump sum. After that, his mistress disappeared, leaving him with a mountain of debt and no one by his side. He was abandoned by both of us, and he truly deserved it. Meanwhile, I secured my share of the property and finally felt a sense of relief. I'm now living in my own apartment, working hard, and recently got a promotion. To celebrate, I'm planning a trip with friends or my parents. Intentionally making someone drink tea spiked with laxatives is a crime, not a joke. My ex-husband and mother-in-law deserve whatever consequences they face. I'm just grateful that my father-in-law was a decent person who understood what I was going through. This whole ordeal was a nightmare, but I'm hopeful that better days are ahead and that I'll eventually find someone truly wonderful.